Feis was a football coach at Stoneman Douglas High School. He was also a hero who saved lives that day. His brother Ray Feis has not spoken publicly about the massacre that took his brother and 16 other innocent lives last Valentine's Day until now. I had a chance to sit and talk with him. Ray Feis can't pass by a single building or street in the city of Coral Springs without thinking of his brother. The memories are everywhere. The loss raw. The questions agonizing.
He was more than a big brother. He was my protector. He was a father figure in a sense when, he was the person that you always knew you could go to.
Aaron Feis was a Stoneman Douglas alum, a security guard at the school, and a football coach for nearly 2 decades.
His main goal was to make sure that every kid was able to live up to their full potential, and he was willing to do whatever he had to. From making sure kids had lunch, buying them shoes, making sure they got the tutoring they need, rides to and from school.
Feis died as he lived, putting others before himself, jumping into a hail of bullets to protect his students.
What my brother did, what Coach Hickson did, and Coach Beagle did, that's who those guys were. That's what a coach is. What they did on that day was no different than any other day, making sure that the kids were safe and caring about them, wanting them to be able to have a future, no matter what they had to do.
There's been a lot of analysis about what happened that day as people try to figure it out, which part of the system failed, which parts of the system failed. What is your understanding of what actually happened that day?
You have an individual with a documented mental health issues, and nobody wanted to do the right thing. And I'm not talking about just on that day, talking about from the first time he stepped foot on a school campus. There's school psychologists, there's administrators, there's other law enforcement professionals, there's all kinds of other people that have had encounters with this person before he ever went to Stoneman Douglas High School. And he just kind of kept getting passed over. I'm getting tired of seeing people pass the buck.
Though he doesn't agree with the Parkland activists that guns are the real problem, he says he does admire them for taking action and that he is in favor of the legislation enacted at the state level in the aftermath of the shooting that allows law enforcement to take away people's firearms if they pose a threat to themselves or others. He also wants schools hardened. And most of all, he wants more attention on mental health so more potential shooters don't slip through the cracks. In fact, he says his brother tried to get Cruz help.
And I do know that my brother brought him to internal suspension multiple times, more than a dozen times. I know he tried, but I know there was other people on campus that tried. But when you have things such as the Promise program and other incentives that the school board has put in place, the teachers and the staff don't have the amount of backing that they actually need to have these policies play out how they should.
The Promise program is a controversial intervention program to prevent young offenders from entering the judicial system, providing alternatives to arrests for misdemeanor offenses. Cruz was recommended for the program for a vandalism offense, but didn't complete it. Nicholas Cruz, his discipline before this included profanity, disobeying staff, vandalism, being disruptive, fighting, breaking rules on the bus, bringing prohibited items to school. So he had a long record of small infractions, but none of those would have resulted in an arrest per se.
All depends on how you look at it. What were the banned items? What was the vulgarity and all of that kind of stuff? I know for a fact he had swastikas drawn on his bag. If you have someone who is repetitively doing things like this, they need help. And they need to be removed from the situation and get that help they need, as opposed to removed from the situation and just placed with someone else so they can be that person's problem.
Feis admits some days he doesn't have a lot of hope.
I'm very angry, extremely angry, but there's nothing that I can do about it at this point. All I can do is try to get the word out about what I believe needs to be done so this doesn't have to happen again.
Feis has endorsed Dr. Richard Mendelson, a psychologist and one of his brother's best friends since they were teenagers, who's running for the school board. For now, he says he's focused on making sure his sister-in-law is taken care of and that he's always there for his 9-year-old niece. How do you explain something like that to her?
Your daddy did something that no other person would do. he made sure more kids came home, and you just have to be proud of that, because not too many people would do that in this world today. He did something that other people who were trained to do refused.
Does she have questions?
She doesn't ask, why is daddy not coming home? She asks, how do we make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else's daddy? She's a very clever little girl.
The fallen coach's spirit embodied best in the young lives he saved.
All I can do is think about him and smile, even when I'm sad, even when I'm upset, and just be grateful for the relationship that I did have with him, and for all the time that I had with him that no one else did.
And Ray Feis does say he believes both Sheriff Scott Israel and Superintendent Robert Runcie should step down, at least temporarily.